All right, Mr. Galvin Widjaja. Super excited to meet you, man.
Hi, Baker. Great to meet you as
Yes.
well.
Yeah. I'm glad we can make this happen. I know you're a super busy guy, so thank you for being flexible with me. Um, I've been getting some different emails and stuff from different platforms about getting people on the show and everything. I guess I meet some of the key like indicators people are looking at of like above a certain amount of episodes or whatever, right? So when I saw yours though, and your team kind of reached out, I was very intrigued because a lot of what I've been talking about on the podcast recently has been AI, almost exclusively just going all in on AI. So you have some very interesting, especially with Lauretta AI. You have a very interesting AI venture that I want to talk about, but I also think we'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't start out with like your roots, and where you started, because one thing that I thought was interesting of like your previous career and then AI startup. So what bridge the gap? What did you do previously, and how did you get into this AI startup?
Yeah. No, thank you. I started this AI startup when I was in my 30s, right? So it was
Okay.
like maybe 33, 34 years old. And so I had a couple of careers before that. And it was always two parallel careers. And so on the top, so what I call my top line career was very corporate. So I did 5 years in a management consulting kind of gig, and I did another 5 years in the banking kind of big data kind of situation.
Yeah.
And then I have my second tier, and that's kind of like the passion projects, kind of my family businesses. And in my case, it was I ran a bunch of restaurant chains, and there was a restaurant chain that is really tuned to the migrant population. And so, in the US, there's something called the H3 visa, and people don't really talk about it much. It is the visa that you get if you are being hired to harvest. So it's a 4 month visa. It comes to the beginning of the harvesting period. You help to
Okay.
harvest the vegetables that you leave. It's largely Mexican people who get it. I ran a restaurant that was really driven by that kind of clientele. It was in Singapore, and Singapore has the equivalent of the H3 visa. It has a work permit with very, very low requirements that is largely driven by the fact that Southeast Asia has a lot of helpers. Helpers are people from even poorer countries than your own who come in. A helper in Singapore would get a salary of will be the equivalent of 550 US dollars a month.
Okay.
Um, and They would live in a way that might be, at least by a first world or European standard, be considered modern slavery. And what I mean by that is that they live in your house, they do work a lot of hours, and they help out. And people who have worked in the Middle East or in Asia would be very familiar with this. And these kind of people, they miss home, and so we work with that kind of people. Now, the thing
Okay.
about working with these kind of people is not just that you work with them, but you also work with staff and team members that are from the culture. And so it's
Yeah.
very different in terms of the kind of people that we work with. And hopefully, and I think in many ways, it kind of painted kind of our philosophy of the world, which in a business like AI, where you have a chance to change or define a component of the future world, I think it matters a lot.
Yeah, I think so too. So you were in the restaurant business, and you also did quantitative finance, right? That was
Yes,
that was
I was a
that was right
quant.
before.
That's right.
Okay, got it. So the restaurant chain that you ran, you feel like that's kind of what shaped your understanding of automation and things like that.
I think my day job shaped my perspective on data and AI, and
Yeah.
quantitative finance is something that I like to think of the investing and at least the high speed trading world as a much more mature alternative version of the AI world. So, for
Okay.
example, a couple of years ago, every AI person had one role, and the role was called data scientist. And so, probably if you were in school for 5 years ago, you would hear everybody say, like, the future job is to be a data scientist. Nobody says AI, data scientist anymore.
Yeah.
The reason is because that role has now split into specific parts. There are risk analysis people, there are data people, there are cleaning specialists, there are people in the risk analysis side, there are the algorithm people, and so on and so forth. The high speed trading world was fully mature in that particular aspect about a decade and a half ago. So there were the risk analysis, there were the model people, model evaluation. It was exactly the same structure. And we also use the same tools. So large scale processing of data from random sources
Are
and
you using
AI.
platforms like Pinecone for that type of thing? Like what companies are relevant in the like big data realm now?
So the big data realm, so Pinecone is something in what we call the vector world. And so the
Okay.
vector embedding world is a world of taking a large amount of data, and rather than trying to process the data, you say, I cannot tell what that data is, but I can recognize that pattern again. That is the vector encoding or the
Yeah.
vector embedding world. That's where Pinecone works. In the world of financial data, it's very different. So you use things like Murex and purely finance specific tools for
Got it.
creating and structuring products and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of how that particular component worked. And then at night, a lot of my work was with humans. And so I built, I think, in many ways, a very human centric startup. And that can be both a good and bad thing. But well, I guess we'll kind of have to get into that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so you talk about making a kind of a human first startup, right? And let's kind of almost bridge into Lauretta AI, right? Talking about, you have this background in quantitative finance, you have this background with these restaurant chains and understanding kind of some automation and how data and big data can kind of play a role and what was your human first approach to starting Loretta, and why would you categorize it as a human first AI company?
So I think uh, there's kind of a pre-Chat GPT world and a post-Chat GPT world.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the way that people are looking at AI today are in a very universal kind of like world-changing way. And this is something that kind of expanded out of the proliferation of ChatGPT. That's a 2023 narrative, so a couple of years ago. In 2019, when we built the startup as an AI startup, um, we also looked at the world in a physical way. And essentially, what we said was, okay, in the digital world, the world of AI data analytics is much more mature than the physical world.
Hmm.
And the physical world was driven by companies like Verkada and companies like Density. And that was all about identifying the information about spaces. And a lot of it was driven by computer vision and sensors, and IoT was the big thing at that moment. Um, the thesis that we had was this: we could understand the entire world by ignoring the environments and entirely focusing on the activities and the intents of every individual in the space. We could essentially extrapolate what a place is really about by looking at all of the behaviors of people within the space and the way that they interact and the intentions that they have for the future, and bringing that together. And so we built a startup around that particular narrative. And we first did two things. One was we said, can you build an entity centric, a human centric model of the world? And to do that, the first thing we did was we said, let's take a universal sensor, which in our case was CCTV cameras because they're
Yep.
everywhere. And then the second thing we did was we said, let's build the best AI system for integrating the human behavior across the senses. So we have one view of the world through human activity. And so fast forward a couple of years later, we a lot of our companies right now, a lot of our customers are like security companies, Homeland
Yep.
Security, TSA, and so on are also obviously customers of us. And the first thing we do is we take every individual and very CSI like. If I take a picture of your leg and your shoe and your socks, and we see another picture of you from the front later, we're like, this guy, I saw him before 2 hours
Hmm.
ago, he's wearing the same socks. And so we can create a continuous narrative of you,
Yep.
of every individual in the space, and we use that to then aggregate all of the sensor data and build intent profiles. So profiles of your behavior, your activities, and your intentions in your mind. And we use
Okay.
that to kind of understand buildings and spaces.
Yeah. So I think probably listeners at this point are maybe even getting a little bit scared, right? And I know that's a lot of kind of what you guys do is focus on the privacy aspect. Um, I'm curious as far as our question because, like I said, I've been deep into AI. You've been in it for years, right? I've been in it for months at this point, and I've been building some cool stuff. But this is all super intriguing to me. It's very very cool. So I'm trying to picture how something like this is built, how something like this is rolled out, and the example I guess of trying to make sense to it in my mind that I think about is like one of the genius things I think about what Elon did with autonomous cars. And they just launched their first couple of test runs. I guess it was like a month ago, of like fully autonomous humanless Teslas, recently in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Is those cars have billion, because they were already out driving the road, the technology was already there, they were tracking movements for so long. Those cars have billions and billions and billions of data points around human behavior, driving behavior, pedestrian behavior, other motor vehicles, what things to look out for. They're so well trained, but they were just training themselves for so long without doing anything. And so now whenever you release the fully autonomous ones with zero human in the loop, they've got so many data points that they're a lot of times virtually flawless, because they've been trained on these billions if not trillions of data points of real world experience and interaction. So with something like what you've built, right, was this something that was almost plugged into some of those CCTV like networks and everything for a while you were doing your modeling, while you were doing your data collection, while you were
Yeah.
trying to figure out what is this algorithm that's needed to do what you're trying to do with Lauretta?
So the answer is yes. I think there are two things that is important to understand for people who are looking into the AI space and not kind of understand the nuance of it. And one of them is the amount of data is not the question. It is all about the amounts of samples of the specific events. And so AI
Okay.
kind of falls into two major categories. There are those that are based on identifying a component of an event. So, for example, detecting a bag in a image, and there are those where are explaining the entire image, right? And there's always a combination of the two. But AI that cannot fail, fault tolerant AI, such as with security systems like we use, or like self driving cars, where you need to interpret the world in front of you at 80 miles per hour,
Mm-hmm.
you have to do type 1, which is understanding those specific events as they happen. And to kind of prove that point and to kind of see that out, the easiest way to think about it is to think of when you use like an image generation tool. Like go to ChatGPT today and you say, create an image of the scene at a football game from the view of a CCTV camera or from a drone, and what you find is that you cannot generate an even remotely convincing image. And the
Mm.
reason for that is that the primary data source is YouTube videos and online videos. And something that you and I, as people who also have a little bit of experience in the media industry, know is that every video has something that the real world does not have, which is an author and a cameraman, right? There is
Yeah.
a director and there's a cameraman, and every image has a narrative in it. The world's videos from CCTV cameras can have no narrative in it whatsoever, right? And so we the data that could be used to understand the world from a neutral standpoint doesn't exist in the world. Just like the data used to make a car drive safely through a public space through cameras alone did not exist prior to Tesla. And
Mm.
so you had to go from 0 to 100, and the way to make a viable startup is to find a path that has intermediate steps. Tesla could make lane following cars that created driving assistant cars that eventually became self-driving cars. Likewise, we could build systems that assist security guards to validate alerts to then automate systems. And so that narrative is an important kind of aspect to how these things can be matured.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Yeah,
Yeah.
I assumed it would be relatively a similar roadmap there. So that's good. I think that makes it very understandable to why, for the person that might not be as ingrained inside of AI or understanding a lot of these things. That's a relatively blanketed example where I think people can understand. Okay, that makes sense on why you would have to do what you did in the order of events that you did it to
Yeah.
get to where we're at now. Um, so I'm the human first aspect of what you built, right? How would you describe the human first aspect? Is that purely the fact that we're understanding psychology and intent, basic engineering and things like that at a very high level with watching so many humans, right? Or interpreting that data visually? Or
Yeah.
what is the human first approach that you've taken here?
There is two parts of it. There is an effectiveness part of it, which is kind of what we talked about, which is how a human first way of viewing the world is helpful to our startup. But there's a
Hmm.
second part of it, which is when tools like ours are used, they are by nature tools that enter into the realm of your own personal data, because I'm trying to extrapolate your thoughts in a way. I make no qualms about pretending to identify what you are trying to think. And
Yeah,
I'm also extremely, as a company, we are internally within the people that we work with, very, very strong advocates of not saying that the AI should ever decide a person's guilt,
fate,
fate, and so on and so forth. Pretty terrifying stuff.
very.
Um, but at the same time, the other thing that is in the new world, right? There's another part that's very fundamental, and that is the question of privacy being lost as AI comes out. The first thing I want to say, and kind of to set the stage, is that if you believe that in the next 10 years you will have a neighbor with a robot dog or anything even remotely like that, you probably have to also admit that you are going to have sensors, maybe cameras, looking at the physical location in your homes and
Hmm.
not just in public places. Because the robot dog does not have Dojo and like GPT like in their heart, right? They're gonna have
Yeah.
a sensor in the building that's telling it what to do, etc., etc. That's fine. So that means there is going to be an invasion of your space with a sensor. The one thing I want to do is, knowing that that will happen, we will build the system that ensures that your identity does not become part of the equation, so that that data cannot be tied to you, so that and in any way, not just today, but in a future, in a forward looking manner. And the one thing that we do to do this is we make sure that the entire system operates without ever creating a biometric signature of who you are.
Mm.
This is very important because if I create a biometric, so let's say I use facial recognition at some point in
Yeah,
the
face would be
pipeline,
yeah, that'd be the first thing that I would go to is yeah,
right? That's
face.
the thing that everybody thinks about. First thing first, tools that use facial recognition to understand the world exist. They're pretty freaking terrifying. They're all over the world. Um, here's a little demo that I tried for myself, and I just want you to know about it, which is
Yeah.
that I had one of those little facial recognition door openers in one of my offices, right? Those
Okay,
little
yeah.
like door things, and it was a Chinese system. It was from Alibaba. I bought it from there, and it had admin as the SQL password. So I logged into my doorbell, and then I copy and pasted the cell that had my ID in it, and I copied it into my PC. And using that ID that that system used, my MacBook camera was able to recognize me as me. What does that mean? That
Wow.
means that key, that facial recognition key, is a universal key.
Yeah, that not just that system has,
There is
every
one
system has.
password, you cannot change it as the same password everywhere. If you steal it, you cannot change that password. You need plastic surgery, man. So that is a path that cannot be returned from, right?
Wow.
We also know that because we have customers that are bigger than us, and in some cases have certain kind of jurisdictions, like police forces can subpoena your data and so on and so forth. We make sure that that particular intermediate step that uses facial recognition doesn't exist in our system at all.
Mm.
And we take the weaknesses that come with it. So our system can re-ID you across 300 cameras today, constantly, and in 24 hours when you go back, it doesn't remember that you're the same person.
Hmm.
So we build it in a way where we don't have the means or the data to be subpoenaed, to be captured, and to kind of reverse engineer these behaviors out of it. The other thing that we do is we make sure that we aggregate in a way that is rich in evidence. And so rather than say, this is your intent, I will say there's a likelihood for this intent because of these 16 behaviors as we showed this way in a very transparent way, so that we are inducing the individuals, the security guards, the agents that are looking at the data to not really care about my conclusion. And in many cases, I don't give the conclusion, but to look at the line of evidence that we can capture with pretty high confidence, so that the way that we think about it is, if you get stopped at a traffic light by a
Mhm.
policeman, that person is doing a detection based thing. So 80% of why he stopped you is based on his preconceived notions of what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
20% is okay, you look a bit off or whatever.
Yeah. Yep.
Uh, and when you get into an investigation, like with a CIA person or something like that, then what happens is the opposite, which is then they're entirely building cases of evidence. And in many cases, they've never have met you before. We want to do everything like B and not like A, because
Yeah.
when we fill the room with objective information, it diminishes the power of your profiling and your stereotypes and your historical biases, and that becomes a weaker part of the narrative.
So so many routes I want to kind of talk through there. I want to talk use cases, but first I want to understand, without ever capturing and logging facial recognition, for example, what are you using to capture me 300 times that day in your
Yeah,
kind of example, right? Like, how are you categorizing that to one individual? Because there has to, I'm just thinking database wise, right? Like, there has to be some sort of trail saying this is the same person, because, like, what's the primary key in that
yeah.
database that you are tracking if it's not face?
So, two parts to this. So, one is, um, as a little bit of a primer into AI, when we talk about things like Pinecone and these RAG systems and so on and so forth,
Yep.
it uses the same logic as we use here, which is that the AI actually stops about 80% of the way to the end of the pipeline,
Yep.
and then it goes into what we call a feature recognition or a clustering module, or what they call a encoding or embedding extraction. That's the RAG part of it.
Yep.
Our case is very similar. We have a model of what a person looks like, trained in such a way that the system is very familiar with a person that looks like this from the front, probably looks like this from the back. A person that
Mhm.
wears shoes like this on the left probably wears shoes like this on the right. It's like, yes, there is a 1% of the world that wears mismatched shoes, and
Yeah.
it's like, like business in front, party at the back. That is, yes, that happens,
Yeah.
but primarily there is a mental model of how people are. And by doing that, it could take a partial image of you and extrapolate what the rest of you might look like. We can then take that extrapolated version of you and then match that with that image that came in. And so that matching is the clustering, and then the model is around the expansion of that. That's, yeah. And so that's kind of how the system operates.
Yeah. Okay. Understood there. Now, how this was to be my follow up to that, and it might be something. Also, he mentioned RAG a couple of times, just for anybody like listening. Retrieval augmented generation, is that
Yeah.
okay? So it's a common memory type. Right now, people are getting into MCP and different things like that, but
Yeah.
it's a common memory access, basically, protocol for most AI models. Um, Okay, so you're working with, Department of Homeland Security. You're working with TSA and some of these like big security firms and companies, and even government entities. Let's say that I am a bad actor, right? Like, let's say I'm picked up on CCTV and it's in areas where you guys are being utilized, and it the algorithm determines that I might be up to no good. It flags what does it look like from there, and how does the if they don't have my actual face, how is the security team flagged that this specific person here go intervene?
Yeah. So this is what we do, right? So I think it's interesting to think about the current use case and the alternative use case. And so
Okay.
the current use case of what we do is that we identify the behavior that you have, right? So the person is up to no good. And then when you cross a boundary, then your image can be checked against the database.
Okay.
Very similar to you do a crime, you get stopped by the police then checks up, oh, is there anything else that this guy is up for? That's kind of what we do today.
Okay.
There is an alternative system, which is if we went straight for the facial recognition kind of thing, where it is primarily, I'm going to look at the entire world and decide if any of them are the criminal that I am
Mm.
looking for. The problem with that is that in that particular system, you first have to extract the identities of
Yeah.
everyone. And so the way that we want to do it is that if you don't do anything wrong, you should never get flagged.
Mm.
And one of this a lot of this is driven by a lot of things we did in the restaurant kind of world, because there is a secret in the restaurant industry that I don't think many people know, which is that in most countries, this is essentially the alternative view of the main thing that Anthony Bourdain talked about in Kitchen Confidential, which is the pirate troop that is the back of house staff.
Mm-hmm.
They hang out together, they drink together, they do all sorts of illegal stuff together. The translation of that is also when you run a restaurant business and you want to look for a top chef, you often go to the parole center to look for people who are just leaving the halfway house.
Wow. Okay.
Literally, that is a completely normal thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we had granddaddy Jaffa in our business. He was a 50-year-old guy. He had a ankle monitor on, right? So he was still in the halfway house at 8 p.m. when he finishes his shift. He has
You're
25
back.
minutes to get back, or else he gets a call from the police because he missed his curfew,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he was a mentor and a guide to lots and lots of people in my restaurant. And there was a period over the course of the 2 years that he was working there. There was a period of 3 or 4 months where he started to slip back into his old habits.
Okay.
And we were able to call him out and kind of get him away from the drugs and so on and so forth. But during those 3 months, it is okay to call somebody out because he needs intervention. During the other 21 months of the 2 years, there is absolutely no reason, at least in my opinion, that he should be treated any differently from anyone else. And if your facial recognition system was identifying potential suspects first, so you're observing those people more closely, then that's an issue to me.
Got it. So your system is primarily observing these behaviors and then reporting them immediately after.
Yes. Yeah.
Got
That's
it.
right.
Okay. Okay. I'm following there. Why don't we use this time then to, can you highlight a couple of your favorite, um, I don't know if favorite is the right word, right? But maybe some of the coolest things that you guys have either seen or heard of happening thanks to Lauretta AI.
Yeah. So I can tell you a couple of the interesting ones.
Yes.
First, I want to tell you one that is completely not in the security space, but in the retail space.
Okay.
And we also work, and as I mentioned, the tool is fundamentally a tool about human understanding. And so we have retail clients besides security clients. And in retail clients, what we found is that in certain places where we were running, that the low hanging fruit of that particular place, so 80% of the GMV of that shopping mall was from families on the weekend. However, there is a very strong susceptibility to change of that very small 20%, which was the lunch crowd every day.
Okay.
And what we did was we took the supermarket chain. that was in that place with the little restaurants, and that supermarket chain became all prepared food. We replaced it with a prepared food supermarket, and the amount of sales that generated for that shopping mall was so great that the owner of that mall was able to take that mall, sell it in five different parts, and use it to fund five different funds.
Wow.
So five listed funds in the stock market was driven by the success of one mall, one shop change.
Wow. So you're observing behaviors of traffic times when people were in and out,
Yeah, it
and you
allows you to,
switched
yeah,
and
it's
you
you're
realized
A/B
that
testing the real world, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. You observed that there was a pretty decent sized lunch crowd. How this is consistent day to day, a 20% spike in traffic, and so you guys used that data to say, all right, what if we cater to this lunch crowd? If they're in here around lunch, maybe they want to eat. So you tested out making food.
Well, it was not just that we. So this was at the mall, the entire mall with the customer, and so we weren't just looking at the lunch crowd because there was a spike of people, but we looked at this lunch crowd as a group of people whose behavior changes when we change the marketing and the store layout of the place. And so it's the subset of people who um, are moved by a piece of media, right? And so it's very similar to how if you had like a YouTube channel and you were like, okay, there are lots of people who come for this, but
Yep.
this group of people are the loyal ones. These are the ones that become loyal customers. We're going to concentrate on that group. And that's one thing that we did. And it's such an amazing space because A/B testing of leasing and marketing in the real world is so nascent that the opportunities are immense, right? So that's amazing. The second one I'm going to share with you is one in the security industry. And I'm not going to tell you, and I'm not going to give you one that's like a real case, but this is an example that we use.
Yeah,
And
that's
in
fine.
this case, for reasons, right? But for this
Yep.
case, there is a set of 8 images that the FBI put on their website. And this is for a pipe bomb, the pipe bomber of 2020.
Hmm.
And when those 8 images, well, if when all of the video the FBI sent out was pushed through our system, it identified these two people in the crowd, and it said that this person and the behavior, the intent capture that came out said this person has behavior synonymous with a person placing a timed device on the
Okay.
ground. And it did that analysis in about 8.5 seconds. This is what really happened. What really happened is that that person placed a pipe bomb on the ground in real life, which was identified 16 and a half hours later during the Trump rally for his first election.
Yep.
It was identified by a person in the rally. In other words, it was in the right spot. So
Hmm.
if the timer had gone off, I think we would be in a civil war right now. Like this would have been really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, it is interesting, right? So so real couple of real world examples of how the system has and is being used right now.
No, that's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. What let's zoom out and let's talk a little bit if you have time. Do you have a little bit more time?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um what because I think there's a lot of businesses out there, and you are way early to the curve. I even feel like I'm early, right? And we work in completely different industries, but um what are there's a lot of business owners out there that know that they should be doing something with AI,
Yeah,
but have kind of no idea where to start. And I kind of have my theories, but I'm interested in somebody like yourself that's been working with it for so long. What would you recommend to maybe the average entrepreneur listening to this that is, again, knows that they need to do something in the AI realm or they might get left behind, but doesn't have any idea what they should try first or do first?
yeah. So I have two key pieces of advice, I think, for every AI entrepreneur. One is, um, you have to understand the difference between AI and something like AWS
Hmm.
cloud. And the reason why I say that is that almost every service that is built on AWS is not wrapped AWS. It is AWS as a component for a real business that sits on top of it. A lot of AI businesses today are wrapped APIs of AI businesses. And the problem with that is two things. One is you have what I call a tin business. So a tin business is where a large portion of your service is a third party service. So for example, if you're Peter levels and you're gonna create 16 different startups and each one takes 1 week, and then we see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'm gonna create a new one in jQuery. I'm gonna do it in 2 weeks in a cafe. That's fine. But if you want to build a real business and actually hire people, then you can't do that, right? And so if you're gonna do that, you cannot build a business that has the risk of being entirely superseded by a change in the AI underlying model,
Mm.
or entirely absorbed by one of the AI customers. One of the problems that we have with AI today is that ChatGPT and Gemini is moving fast. It's moving so fast that every person who created an AI image generator is now dead,
Yeah.
right? They're gone. It's free now. Like it's literally free.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and Google just
everyone,
released Nano
yeah,
Banana, and
Nano
that
Banana is amazing.
it's insane. Which
It's
pretty much just
amazing.
put all the rest. Well, if your tool was built on any of the other ones, like
You're dead.
now you're dead in the water if you don't switch.
The other problem is that a lot of them and the other thing that you cannot do is you cannot build a better version of an AI. One of the things that we realized a couple of years ago, and a lot of AI startup founders are now learning, is that I have my data and I make my AI 3% better than the one on the public API. It's not going to work because what has happened is that the public API's quantum leaps from GPT 3 to 3 to 4 to 4.5 to 5 is that the jump in the core capability superseded the entire improvement from my $5 million startup of data, like
Yeah.
just the core AI improving. And it did it by superseding every one of those data sources at the same time. So
Mhm.
if your data is a variation of the public data sets, so if your data is very similar to open web data, if your data is a specialized scraped version of the scraped data on the internet, you're gone. And so instead, you have to do one of two things. One is you have to do what I call a tick AI startup, which is kind of our direction. And the reason why our AI startup never felt a risk of being stepped into by an open AI is that we built a stack of services on a foundation of AI. Rather than
Mm.
AI being the thing that we provide, it is the base of what we use to gather information. And so what will happen is that our base will keep improving, but the stack on top of that will still need to be duplicated by hand and never be superseded by the AI behind it. That's number
Wow.
one.
Okay.
The second version of that is to use AI as an enhancement for an existing business. And so you do that to use AI to expand what your business does. And I'll give you two quick examples. One is Casper. You know Casper, the bed company.
Hmm.
You know Casper got sued because they were the best at creating micro sites to target people online. So if you are a um, if you're somebody who works by hand, like a stonemason in Ireland, and you wanted a bid, and you Google bid for a stonemason in Ireland, there is a website created by Casper called A Bid, made specially for stonemasons in Ireland. Like the
Wow. Okay.
guy completely flooded the universe with microsites for every category of person who needs a bid,
Yeah. I mean,
and they
that's.
got sued. They were so good at it, right?
Mhm.
You could actually do this by hand now. Like you could generate 400 microsites in like 2 hours and
I mean,
completely do it.
Zapier comes to mind with
Yeah,
that example, right? Like you look up automating anything or connecting anything to anything, there is a Zap either
Yeah,
pre-built or even a landing page pre-built. Even if they don't have the actual integration, it says connect X with Y with Zapier, and then you click on it, and they're like, we don't have that one, but we have this one, and
exactly.
Zapier's
Amazing.
yeah.
So, and then suddenly AI has enhanced the reach of your own, maybe your completely different brick and mortar company even by like 100 times. And so that's
Mhm.
amazing, right? Right. So yeah, I think that those are the ways that I think really make a difference, and
Mm.
that's how I would use AI today. Um, One of the things that I always remember is a lot of enterprise or deep tech businesses like myself, we can succeed because our incumbents are slow.
Yeah,
But if you are gonna go after OpenAI, OpenAI is pretty freaking fast.
they are.
And
It
so,
seems,
what do you want to do?
yeah,
Right?
yeah. It seems like these AI companies are OpenAI and Anthropic, and it seems like they're almost being recklessly fast with
Yeah,
shipping stuff, right?
I would agree with
Um,
recklessly fast.
yeah, yeah. And that's the most concerning part is like it is moving so quickly nonstop. So I want to kind of just to kind of fully explain, there's this kind of trend, and I know of companies that have made a lot of money doing this trend where, you mentioned rappers earlier.
Yeah,
People call them like they're apps basically that are called GPT rappers.
yeah,
Is what the thing that I see the most often in my space. I do a lot of like stuff in the fitness space and health space, and one of the biggest ones right now that I think a lot of my listeners will recognize is there are one app in particular started this trend where they basically you take a picture of your plate of food, and it'll
yeah,
give you the macronutrients for that plate of food.
right.
It's literally just an app that sends that picture to ChatGPT. ChatGPT estimates and then sends the information back, and it's presented in like a pretty way on the app screen.
Yeah,
People, this one app that made that, right? They made millions and millions and millions of dollars, and then other people saw them do that, and they're like, "Oh, I could make that," because you could literally vibe code something like
you could
this,
vibe code
guys.
that, yes, for
You could
sure.
vibe code something like this in 2 hours. You could
Yeah,
vibe code something like this and have it like going. And people don't realize that I know another one where we've probably all seen or at least I've seen the ads. I'm a new homeowner,
yeah,
so like where you take a picture of like your grass or a plant or something, and then it analyzes your plant, and then it tells you what type of plant and then what you should do to fix the plant, make it healthy. GPT wrapper, right?
yeah,
Like there's a million things like that are out there, and that's what Galvin. That's what you're talking about whenever you're referencing kind of these wrappers is
yeah,
you're utilizing something that's powerful like a GPT or like an AWS, but you're kind of slapping your own label over it and saying this is my product because I'm just telling it to act with this specific kind of smaller frame of you only analyze these
yeah.
inputs.
It's a prompt engineering layer behind it. This is take
That's
this
all it is.
image, ask these 6 questions, and then reply. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to explain that because a lot of these terms, it took me a while to learn a lot of them.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
want to make sure that listeners who maybe aren't as into it as me, and definitely not as into it as you, as much history and experience you have, are kind of following along. Um,
yeah. No,
now I want
imagine this, right? Because I think this is one of those that's really interesting. I know we don't have much time, but there are lots and lots of gym apps out there, and
yeah,
almost every one of them is a subscription to a set of exercises, right?
yep,
A set of exercise videos. You could take with Nano Banana, you could take every one of those videos. You could, instead of creating the full workouts, you could create every component of it. You could say make a, and then just use a logic tree to decide the precise exercise sequence and timing and load for the person. Now, as a person who needs a lot, I mean, I don't exercise enough, obviously. I've for as somebody like this, I have a person that I use YouTube videos of, and I can
yeah,
only use his videos from 3 years ago.
hmm
And the reason is that, yeah, I'm not going to say who it is, but there's a particular YouTube, one of those people who do gym exercise. I can only use the video from 3 years ago because he's so much fitter now that I feel like I feel terrible
You feel bad
following
about
him.
yourself.
Like he's so much better because he's been doing he does the video every day, right?
Yeah,
He's so much better than I am now.
that's
I'm kind
funny.
of okay. I carry similar weight to what he carried 3 years ago, and
Yeah,
I like the fact that he's like dying by the end of the 30 minutes as well, right? But
yeah.
now he's
It
super
feels
fit.
attainable. Feels like it
It feels
encourages you.
great, and like with Nano Banana, you could realistically make the person doing the videos perfectly aligned with what this person wants to see.
Yes.
And you could create that video customized for everyone. The actual covering layer is basic.
Mhm.
You could probably prompt engineer the entire video generation pipeline with your own $200 API subscription,
You
and you
can.
would have like the most high end looking exercise app out there,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah, and
really
it could also be in any setting, right?
in
Like
any setting.
yours could be in like working out in space, right? And it's got, things floating around in the back. Like it's going to be so much more engaging than a video of just one of us in a gym
Yeah,
demonstrating something, right?
exactly.
Yeah. No, that's that's the both the exciting thing and the terrifying thing, about where everything's headed is I think it's easy for people to reason one way or another, and that's why I think still, even though it's so much easier now for people to create and to build and do these startups and everything, still think entrepreneurs are going to persist through and win. Because to me, whenever I I catch myself there's all these new things coming out nonstop, and there's all these people that are making all this money. Like, more millionaires have been created in the last 3-4 years since GPT release than ever before.
Yeah,
And there's more people and everything, but it's accelerating it for a lot of people as far as wealth generation. And it's easy, I think, with the speed of how everything's going. The decision tree to me is like, wow, there's so much more opportunity. I got to go now.
yeah,
Or it's, I don't even know where to start. I'm just going to wait. I'm not going to do anything.
yeah,
Right. And I think the entrepreneurs are following that path and saying, let's go now. We got to do this. Don't want to get left behind. And everyone else is kind of sitting back like, I don't understand it yet, but at some point maybe it'll feel easier to me. And then I think by the time it gets easy enough to where anybody can do anything at any time, that's a completely different world to navigate, right? Like that's going to be it's going to be really interesting to,
yeah.
to, to see where it heads. One more question, if you got time.
Of course.
You seem to have built Lauretta AI with ethics in mind, right? Ethics first, with privacy and not using going the facial recognition route, which I feel like probably most of your vendors, your customers would have probably pushed you or tried to pressure you into doing it some
Yeah, like
point or
everyone.
another. Um, what advice do you have for building an ethical AI company that is not only better for humanity or human first, but also compliant? In a world where these new compliances are these new regulations are coming out constantly, whether it's SOC 2 or some of these other
Yeah,
things that are coming after AI and how data is collected, how data is stored, how data is saved, etc.
yeah. I think there are two things that to say about that. I think the first is the compliance frameworks that exist out there. If you are in the industry, you know that they suck,
Mm,
and you have made the choice in many ways whether you are going to be an ethical startup or not based on your conscious decision to create your own internal set of principles or find a way around the compliance framework, both of which are possible. I think that's the first thing in that.
okay.
And the second thing I want to say is that when you are building a particular startup in a particular space, you tend to have a surprisingly clear and surprisingly accurate view of the future, at least in the area that you're building the startup in.
Yep.
And so, because of that, you can you have to be fully you have to be true to yourself about how you interpret the vision that you have in the future, because I could say like, hey, I'm a good person, I can create the most epically comprehensive security surveillance software out there, and it's not going to be used on me, right? I am not Tom Cruise, this is not Minority Report.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
But I could also kind of choose to be with humanity and not just see myself as different. And when we do it that way, then we put ourselves in a position to make conscious decisions either way. And then once you are conscious of the decisions, then it's a lot more straightforward. I think the two things that you cannot do is you cannot walk blindly into your own folly, right? And
Mm,
the second one is once you're able to see, then you need to know, you need to really think about the decisions you're making, and that's kind of something important for us, and I think for all startups in this space.
I agree. I definitely agree.
Yeah,
We the main company, what we service right now is fitness coaches, online fitness coaches, and we
yeah,
started off with just automation, and really, workflows and simple text and email, things and funnels, and just giving them kind of a CRM system to manage and grow their and scale their businesses. But we had I had kind of a come to Jesus type of moment with myself, with recognizing where things are headed with AI, probably 5 months ago now, 6 months ago now. And it was kind of like, oh, this is coming. There's nothing I can do to slow this down. It's only speeding up.
yeah,
And if we don't get ahead of it and do well, two things are going to happen. We're going to suffer as a business, and our clients are going to suffer as a business, because the
yeah,
main concern and why our my industry has been so resistant to AI is because they think that AI GPT is going to replace them, soon.
right,
And if they adopt it, they're essentially starting the replacement of themselves.
yeah,
And how I have been telling everybody, and what I've even been telling just entrepreneurs that listen to the show, because we have a lot of people outside of the fitness industry too that listen to the show, is AI has got to be, you've got to look at it as a multiplier. Like, I don't want you
yeah,
to fire employees and use AI. You should look at how can you do 50 to 80% more with your current team by utilizing AI, right? And whether that's more revenue or more support or more capacity or whatever the case may be, use it as a tool to make every piece of the company more valuable.
yeah,
So what we've been focused on building, although we could have gone all in on developing apps and replacements of coaches, like build our own things to replace coaches, which are the people that we serve.
yeah,
What we've been building is two different AI platforms to help coaches be better coaches,
yeah,
right? Remember things they couldn't possibly have remembered about their clients with the help of an AI assistant, right? Or get recommendations and based on data that's constantly being collected anyways by the clients, like you said, of like the data and data integrity, and what's actually happening out there in the real world versus what's potentially would be great to happen, right? Taking that data and doing something intelligent with it, catching things that you might not have caught because you're serving
yeah,
80 clients and you can't possibly remember their changes week to week for 52 weeks per year for across 80 people. um,
exactly.
so I love to hear you say that, if you have a choice, right? Because we could have easily in our scenario just said, you know what, I don't know if coaches are going to be around. Like, well, let's be the villain here. Let's build this and let's replace everybody, and maybe we
Yeah,
can carve
you
out a part.
absolutely have a choice, right?
Yes,
And that's something that
exactly.
we have to know. And if we all choose to avoid it, the vacuum becomes the biggest risk in the industry. And so, one of the, I think, a really interesting example that happened recently, something they talked about was just that the government allowing the H20s, the old GPUs, to be sold to China.
Okay.
And in that little commentary that they talked about, they talked about the fact that if they did not allow the old GPUs to be sent to China, there would be such a profit opportunity for a company like Huawei to create AI GPU chips that they would definitely have one in a couple of years. In the
Mm,
same way, if you think of like the writing industry, like the script writing industry, the fact that all of the current like union members don't use AI. It's the reason why there are so many companies creating fully AI scripts out there right
Projects,
now.
yeah.
And if the fitness industry or any industry actually kind of just avoids it, you're just creating a financial opportunity for a ruthless third party to come in and take that particular area of business, and that will become really terrifying.
Yeah, that was the exact thing that I like. If we as an industry, it's what I told a bunch of our coaches. It was like, if we as an industry do not start using this, someone who is just good at AI will eventually look at our industry and say, oh, I could make a bunch of money here, and then build the things that put you guys out of business. So if you guys
Exactly.
don't start using this and get great at it, you're going to be left behind, period. So Galvin, I really enjoyed this conversation. This is awesome. If you're open to it, I'd love to connect outside of the show and just stay in touch. I think what you're building is really cool. I think the way that you've built it is really cool. And I think a lot of your ideas and how you're maneuvering out there is just very interesting. So I appreciate your time. I know you're a very, very busy person and your flexibility with the scheduling as well. Um, but thank you for coming on the show. And I always ask everybody one last question. The name of the show is the BAMcast. BAM stands for by any means necessary. So, Galvin, what are you going to accomplish by any means necessary?
I what we will do is we will make a privacy centric way of looking at people the norm in the US. I think that's what we want to do.
I love it. I have no doubts you'll do that, man. Appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on the show, Galvin.
Awesome. Take care. Bye. Take care.